In January 1977, the chill from San Francisco Bay swept through the quiet streets of San Jose, California, seeping into the Lion's Den bar, where music and the smell of cigarette smoke mingled in the air heavy with the scent of alcohol. Neon lights flickered, reflecting off cocktail glasses as 24-year-old Laura Jensen stepped out of the bar with a man no one had ever seen before. On the table, her coat was still there, the half-drunk beer glass still giving off cold vapor. A few hours later, Laura's silver Toyota was found in a parking lot near a residential area. Door open, purse intact, front seat reeking of partially burned gasoline. Police combed every nook and cranny. The press reported extensively, but that woman seemed to vanish into the San Jose night. For the 4 decades that followed, her name lay dormant in missing persons files, until a faint fingerprint and an old piece of fabric forced the past to speak, and uncovered one of California's coldest cases in history. Before we dive deeper into this shocking true story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you love these journeys to seek forgotten justice, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Laura Jensen, 24 years old, lives with her 6-year-old son in a small apartment in San Mateo. The broken marriage left her with a prolonged silence, but Laura still tries to maintain a stable routine, going to work at the insurance office, picking up her son from kindergarten, in the evenings reading books or calling her mother in Fresno. To everyone, she is discreet, thoughtful, shares little about personal matters. Friends say that lately Laura seems tired, but still appears strong, as if everything is under control. On Friday evening, she agrees to go with 2 old roommates to a bar in San Jose. They just plan to sit and have a few drinks, listen to music, and chat to relieve stress. The bar is small, crowded, yellow lights reflecting on the steamy glass cups. Laura wears a simple cream-colored dress, a thin sweater, her brown hair loosely down, face lightly made up. She sits at a table near the corner, mostly quietly listening to her friends chat. Towards the end of the night, when the music shifts to a slow beat, she stands up to the bar to order another drink. One friend notices Laura talking to a strange man, tall dark brown hair, wearing a dark green windbreaker. They exchange a few short sentences, then walk out together. No one in the group pays attention, everyone thinks she just stepped out for air or to make a call. The night wind blows lightly through the parking lot, street lights casting on the rain-wet asphalt, and the shadows of the 2 people gradually disappear from sight. From then on, no one sees Laura return. When the bar closes, the 2 friends leave, assuming she went home first. The next morning, the ex-husband drives to pick up the son as usual, but the apartment door is locked. No one answers. The landline phone rings continuously, then cuts off. Friends call her workplace. No one knows anything more. While San Jose starts a normal weekend day, Laura's family's worry grows. Her mother, who still calls her daughter every morning, senses something unusual when the phone rings into the silent void. By the afternoon, unable to bear the waiting, she and Laura's ex-husband drive to the local police station. They bring an old photo of Laura and a detailed description sheet of her appearance, clothing, and her silver Toyota car. The duty officer records the report, opens a missing person file, and promises to send someone to check the area around the bar where she was last seen. Early the next morning, San Jose police begin searching the area around the bar where Laura Jensen was last seen. Just a few hours later, they find her silver Toyota Corolla in a parking lot behind an old apartment complex, not far from the bar. The car is parked neatly in a hidden corner, lights off, doors unlocked. No signs of collision or forced entry outside. A security guard says the car has been there since dawn, but he thought it belonged to a resident in the complex. When police open the door, a faint gasoline smell wafts out. Inside, Laura's purse is still there, wallet and documents intact, no signs of theft. The high-heeled shoes are on the driver's floor, strap loose. On the back seat is a white blouse torn at the shoulder, fabric edges crumpled, as if just pulled hard. A half-used pack of Marlboro cigarettes in the ashtray, a few half-burned. No blood, no signs of struggle. Everything in the car is unusually neat, as if the person inside left very quickly, but not in a hurry. The crime scene investigation team arrives right in the morning. They cordon off the area, take photos, collect samples. The forensic technician notes a small stain on the carpet under the driver's seat. The gasoline smells stronger when the car door is open longer. Possibly someone poured gasoline or tried to set the car on fire, but stopped. No burn marks, but this detail is included in the report. All items are seized: purse, blouse, cigarette pack, lighter, paper cup. Faint fingerprints on the steering wheel and door handle are sampled and sealed. Residents around the apartment complex are questioned. A woman remembers hearing a car engine start in the middle of the night, but saw no one. The parking lot has no security cameras, only dim yellow lights. Police assess the car was intentionally abandoned. The driver knew the area and deliberately chose a low-attention spot. When news of the car reaches the family, Laura's mother and ex-husband immediately go to the scene. They stand behind the yellow tape, silently looking at the car, as if waiting for a miracle. Mrs. Jensen's face pales when she sees her daughter's familiar items brought out from the car. Everyone still hopes she is alive, but the silent car makes that hope fragile. The car is towed to the Santa Clara Forensic Center for detailed examination. Technicians find a few strange fabric fibers on the gear shift and a faint stain on the floor mat, sampled for analysis. The blouse is preserved separately, collar and shoulder torn, stitches popped, possibly from hard pulling. However, no evidence confirming an attack inside the car yet. The fingerprints do not match any in the local crime database. Some are too faint to analyze. The report concludes, no signs of struggle, but the scene may have been staged. The gasoline smell in the car reinforces suspicion that someone wanted to erase traces. In the afternoon, police use search dogs to scour the area around the parking lot and the route from the bar, but find nothing. No blood, no dropped items, no direct witnesses. A bar receipt on the passenger seat printed with payment time matches the time friends left the bar. Accordingly, Laura may have disappeared within half an hour after saying goodbye. That evening, the police department holds a short press conference. They confirm finding the missing woman's car. No clear signs of crime yet, but suspicious situation requiring further investigation. Local media immediately reports, describing the image of the cordoned car in the dark parking lot. Big headline: Laura Jensen's car found. Police investigate possible abduction. Internally, the case is officially classified missing person, suspicious circumstances. A separate investigation team is formed to follow leads on the strange man seen at the bar. For the police, the car is the first and only marker in the disappearance that gradually becomes a mystery lasting decades afterward. After Laura Jensen's car is found, the San Jose Police Department launches a large-scale search campaign. Police teams, volunteers and search dogs are mobilized, dividing areas by radius from the bar where she was last seen. The city map is dense with red dots, marking places to check: residential areas, vacant lots, canals along highways, suburban forests. Flyers with the image of the brown-haired girl with bright eyes are posted everywhere, from gas stations to grocery stores. On them is the simple line, "Missing, please help." Laura's family and police hold a press conference, calling for information from the public. The image of the elderly mother, trembling holding her daughter's photo, airs on the evening news, stirring the community. Local newspapers report on the mysterious disappearance in San Jose, creating a wave of sharing and volunteer searches. Dozens of residents with flashlights and maps wade through mud along riverbanks, Santa Teresa Hills, and forests around Almaden Valley. Calls pour into the hotline. Someone says they saw a woman like Laura with a man at a gas station. Someone reports hearing screams at night. Every report is checked, but no results. No reliable witnesses, no security cameras, no new evidence. Each lead closes with the familiar phrase in reports, no match. After a week, the search is still fruitless. Media shifts, starting to question investigation efficiency. Some articles suggest Laura may have left on her own, due to marriage pressure, while family insists she would never abandon her son. Police hold firm to the hypothesis she left the bar with an unidentified man. They re-interview bar staff, review receipts and payment lists, seeking anyone who met that couple. The only witness remembers a tall man, brown hair, dark green jacket, but can't describe the face clearly. A sketch is released, but no one recognizes it. A reward for useful information is posted at the police station, but no one claims it. The family still searches on their own. Laura's mother drives along riverside roads, stopping to look down at the murky water in silence. Every time police find an unidentified body, she goes to identify, then returns home in disappointment. By the third week, volunteer numbers dwindle. Rain starts, rising water in canals halt searches, flyers on poles fade, paper crumples in the wind, news in papers thins, giving way to new cases. At the police station, Laura Jensen's file thickens with hundreds of statements, but no leads to her. The official report concludes temporarily, no signs of violence or ransom. Victim may have left with an acquaintance or been forced to leave. The family waits in despair. Her mother calls the department every morning, asking for new news. The answer is always none yet. Laura's image appears a few more times on People We're Looking For, interspersed among other disappearances, then gradually fades from TV. The official search ends after nearly a month. The case file is transferred to the Special Crimes Unit, remaining missing person, suspicious circumstances. The city returns to normal rhythm, only the black and white photo on the police bulletin board remains. The young woman's face with small text below, still missing. The search ended, and those who had participated gradually returned to their daily routines, while in the San Jose Police Department office, Laura Jensen's disappearance began to sink into silence. The investigators continued to comb through every detail in the file, but every lead led to a dead end. There were no new witnesses, no additional evidence, and not a single credible call during the following weeks. The articles that had once covered the case stopped appearing on the front page, making way for fresher news, and the image of the young woman with the caption, "Still Missing," now hung quietly on the department's bulletin board. The police expanded the scope of their interrogations, starting with those closest to her. Laura's ex-husband was questioned repeatedly about their recent relationship. He insisted they still kept in touch normally because of their son, and on the night she vanished, he was at home with the child. Neighbors could vouch for that. Friends were called in to provide information, recounting the evening at the bar dozens of times, but their statements never changed. Laura had left with a strange man whose face they couldn't make out. The police checked the bar's customer payment list, scrutinizing every name, but found nothing unusual. Some of Laura's relatives were asked about the possibility that she had left voluntarily. Her mother denied it, saying Laura would never abandon her son. Her workplace, a small insurance office, was also contacted. Colleagues said she had seemed normal in the days before her disappearance, with no signs of wanting to leave her current life. The police temporarily ruled out the possibility of voluntary departure, but they also found no evidence of a kidnapping. In the months that followed, the file was supplemented with a few minor reports, residents calling in sightings of a woman resembling Laura on Highway 101, or rumors that she had been spotted at a coffee shop in Santa Cruz. Each tip was checked, then quickly crossed off. When all leads dried up, the case was officially classified as unresolved missing. There wasn't enough evidence to deem it a crime, but it couldn't be considered a voluntary disappearance either. A limbo state, half belief, half suspicion, left Laura's file in the metal cabinet of the investigations office, filed under a cold case number. Time passed, and the original investigators moved on to other cases. Reports mentioning Laura's name grew fewer and farther between. The family still visited the police department periodically to check in, bringing new photos of her son, but each conversation ended with the familiar apology, "We still don't have anything new." Mrs. Jensen kept a copy of the file, reading through every page repeatedly, trying to find overlooked details, but every line ended the same way, no results. By year's end, the San Jose Police Department reallocated personnel. Laura Jensen's case was transferred to the archives room. The photo of the brown-haired girl was taken down from the bulletin board and filed into a thick binder labeled "Closed, pending new evidence." On paper, it was just one file among hundreds of unsolved disappearances, but for her family, it was an endless void. The apartment in San Mateo remained untouched. Laura's small room preserved just as it was. The clock on the table still stopped at the time she left the house that night. The first year passed, then the second. No one talked about the disappearance anymore. The press stopped running stories, and the police department issued no further updates. Laura Jensen's case became one of the forgotten names in the city's cold storage archives, where unanswered questions lay buried amid the dust of time. In the years after Laura Jensen's disappearance was categorized as unresolved missing, time seemed to stand still for her family. The small apartment in San Mateo where Laura had lived with her son was kept intact by her mother. Everything in the bedroom was preserved as if its owner had just stepped out somewhere. The neatly folded blanket on the bed, the half-empty perfume bottle on the vanity, and the frame holding a photo of the two of them placed next to the stopped clock. Laura's phone number was still maintained by the family. Her mother said she couldn't bear to cut the line, in case one day her daughter called back. Occasionally she would pick up the receiver and dial it just to hear the familiar dial tone, then hang up quickly. Laura's son, Ethan, grew up amid an emptiness that no one in the family could fill. When he started school, the photos on the walls still included his mother, the young woman beaming in a cream-colored dress. At school, when teachers asked students about their parents, Ethan stayed silent. He only said that mom's away, far away. His frail grandfather took him to the park every weekend, telling old stories about Laura, that she loved taking photos, that she liked planting lavender in front of the house. Each time, Mrs. Jensen sat quietly in the living room, gazing out the window, as if afraid that if she turned away, she might miss the moment her daughter returned. Year after year, the case file remained dormant in the San Jose Police Department's archives. Occasionally, when new staff came on board, they flipped through old cases to learn procedures, including Laura Jensen's name. The yellowed pages, typed on a typewriter, were now just numbers and dry notes. None of them could imagine that behind that file was a family that had never stopped waiting. The Jensen family still contacted the police periodically, usually on the anniversary of Laura's birthday or the day she vanished. They hoped that with each passing year technology would advance and uncover new clues. But the answer was always the same: no new evidence, no reason to reopen the case. One officer told them that every lead has been checked, an explanation that sounded objective, but weighed heavier on Mrs. Jensen's heart. Sometimes there were anonymous calls to the house, claiming to have seen Laura in another state, a woman who looked like her working in a diner in Nevada, or someone living homeless in Oregon. The family asked the police to verify, but the results were always negative. Each time Mrs. Jensen lost sleep for nights on end. Ethan, now a teenager, witnessed that pain without knowing what to do, but sit beside her. The 1980s passed, then the 1990s arrived, but time seemed unable to pull the family from the memory of that winter night in 1977. Ethan graduated high school and enrolled in community college nearby to care for his grandmother. In the small apartment, Laura's room remained unchanged. Everyone in the neighborhood knew the story, and usually avoided mentioning it. Every year on January 31st, Mrs. Jensen lit candles on the dining table, placed her daughter's photo next to a small cake, and prayed in silence. Occasionally, the local TV station aired segments on old unsolved disappearances, including Laura's image. Each time the Jensen house phone would ring with a few curious calls, strangers saying they remembered this case, then falling silent. The press no longer mentioned her name, but for her mother and son, Laura remained present in every small detail. The scent from the old perfume bottle, the photo album, the white blouse they kept in a wooden box. In 1997, after 20 years, the San Jose police conducted a review of some old files for statistical purposes. Laura's file was examined again, but with no new evidence, the case remained in unresolved missing status. The report added only a note, inactive, awaiting additional data or evidence. The name Jensen, Laura Ann, became a small line among hundreds of 1970s disappearances, but for the family, it was a wound that would never heal. Mrs. Jensen passed away in the early 2000s. In her will, she left the apartment and all of her daughter's belongings to Ethan, instructing him, "Don't sell it, who knows, one day she might come back." Ethan kept his promise. He started a family and had children, but still lived in the old house where everything evoked memories of the woman he only remembered through her voice, on cassette tapes. Every time he saw his own daughter running around the living room, he wondered, where did my mom go that night? Time marched on, technology changed, and the police gained new modern tools, but Laura Jensen's disappearance file remained in the metal cabinet, covered in thick dust. No new evidence, no witnesses, no confessions. She stayed a forgotten name on the endless list of those who vanished without a trace, and for her family, an emptiness that no amount of time could fill. In the fall of 1986, nearly 10 years after Laura Jensen vanished in San Jose, a hunter in Boise County, Idaho, while tracking deer tracks along the Payette River bank, spotted something shiny amid the weeds. As he approached, he realized it was a piece of fabric caught on the ground. Beneath the decayed leaves, segments of human bones emerged from the damp mud. Local police were immediately called in. The scene was a sparse forest area, more than a mile from the main road, silent and desolate. The skeleton lay tilted to one side, mostly decomposed, with only a few scraps of clothing remaining. Standing out amid the damp earth was an ivory white blouse, the fabric rotted and torn at the shoulder. No wallet, papers or personal items. Nearby was only a rusted metal ring, unmarked. The Boise County investigative team worked through the afternoon. They photographed the site, collected soil samples, measured distances, but there was too little to go on for any conclusions. No signs of a struggle, no weapon, no tire tracks from a skid. One investigator noted the body could have lain there for years, possibly dumped in the late 1970s. At the Boise coroner's office, the medical examiner determined the victim was female, approximately 20 to 30 years old, of average height. No clear bone trauma was found. The report stated, cause of death undetermined, possible victim of crime, accident or natural exposure. At that time, DNA identification technology was not widely used. Police could only compare teeth, bones and paper missing persons files. They sent notices to neighboring states, Oregon, Washington, Montana, even California, for cross-referencing. Typed files were mailed out, taking weeks to arrive. The results were all negative. No missing persons matched the description. In the final report, the investigator wrote, identity unknown, victim possibly from out of state. With no leads, the remains were tentatively named Boise County Jane Doe. The following month, the county police office held a small burial at the local cemetery. On the simple headstone was only Jane Doe, found 1986, forever unknown. The news appeared briefly in the local section of the Boise Statesman. Police find unidentified woman's body near Payette River. After a few days, the story vanished from the media. Samples of Jane Doe's bones and hair were stored at the Idaho State Lab's coroner's office. The sealed metal box was labeled unused forensic samples, with no central database for comparisons and genetic testing costs exceeding the county's budget. The investigators could only hope for better technology in the future. A year later, the case was marked inactive, a silent status until new evidence surfaced. In Idaho's mountainous region, locals quickly forgot the incident. The hunter who found the remains recounted the story a couple of times and then stopped, saying he avoided hunting in that forest afterward. Police believed the body might belong to a tourist or a woman who got lost. No one considered a connection to disappearances in other states. No one even knew about the name Laura Jensen in a file 800 miles away. Months passed, and the Boise County Jane Doe file lay dormant in the coroner's storage cabinet, occasionally inventoried when the agency upgraded equipment. Each time the box was moved, the handler noted only a few lines: relocated samples, identity undetermined. Her remains rested in cold storage, alongside dozens of other unidentified cases, mostly victims of accidents, disappearances, or undetermined crimes. By the late 1980s, as Idaho began building its first electronic database of missing persons, the Jane Doe case was added to the list, but drew no attention. No relatives came forward, no one identified her from the clothing, and no new missing persons reports matched the description. The file contained only 4 black and white photos, and a small bag holding blouse scraps, all marked unlinked. Around the same time, in San Mateo, Laura Jensen's apartment remained intact. Her family had no idea that thousands of miles away, in Idaho's quiet forest, what was left of her had just been found. No national database system, no DNA bank, and no connections between police departments. Each state kept its own files. Each disappearance existed in isolation, like puzzle pieces that would never fit together. The Boise County case closed with a few short lines in the internal file. Female body, unidentified, found near Payette River, cause of death undetermined. Buried. Case file #BC 86107. For the investigators, it was just one unsolved case among hundreds from that decade. But later on, it would be from those quietly preserved bone samples in that metal box that a forgotten mystery spanning 4 decades would be awakened, when science finally had the means to name the woman. After being named Boise County Jane Doe, the case file was transferred to the Idaho State Forensic Lab for storage. The skeletal remains were placed in a labeled metal box, preserved in the cold storage of the Idaho State Forensic Lab alongside dozens of other unidentified cases. The paper file consisted of only a few pages of reports, crime scene photos, and a brief description of the remaining clothing. No identifying information, no clear evidence. The case was classified as unidentified remains. At that time, DNA technology was still unfamiliar to investigative agencies in small states. Idaho lacked funding for genetic testing and had no national database for comparison. Investigators could only send notices to neighboring states to check missing persons files, but the results were all in vain. By the end of the 1980s, the file received its final update and was stamped inactive, awaiting future development. The bone and hair samples were sealed, waiting for a technology that had not yet been born. Each year, the forensics office inventoried the unidentified files. On the statistics sheet, the line repeated like a formula: BC Jane Doe, female, found near Payette River, DNA unavailable. The person in charge only noted briefly sample stable. That name gradually faded from the long list of unidentified cases. The original investigators retired, and newcomers knew nothing more than a few black and white photos. No one thought this case might be connected to a woman missing in California nearly 10 years earlier. In the 1990s, the Jane Doe file remained dormant. No new forensic results, no matching reports. The 1992 inventory report stated, "No match found, remains unidentified." From then on, the name disappeared from task force meetings. When DNA technology began to become widespread in the early 2000s, the Idaho State Lab still lacked the budget to analyze degraded old samples. The bone sample recovery process was too complex. They continued to preserve and wait. Each year, the person in charge only signed off, "Sample safe, not yet eligible for testing." In California, Laura Jensen's file suffered a similar fate. In the San Jose Police Department's archives, the thin file lay still among hundreds of unsolved missing persons cases. New officers only knew her name from a few lines in old reports. No new evidence, the case could not be reopened. The Jensen family still called the police department each anniversary, but the answer was always the same: nothing has changed. When Laura's mother passed away, her file became just a faded name on the list. Entering the 21st century, the two cases, one unidentified body in Idaho, one missing person in California, existed in parallel for nearly 3 decades without anyone recognizing the connection. Each file was less than 10 pages thick, stored in 2 states thousands of miles apart. On paper, both bore the red stamp unresolved. In reality, they were 2 halves of the same story, but the time gap and technological limitations kept them from ever meeting. When Idaho began digitizing forensic files in the early 2010s, the data on Boise County Jane Doe was re-entered. Female 20-30 years old, discovered 1986, light-colored blouse, no identifying features. Under the notes column, the technician added a line: DNA stored, future testing recommended. That was the last time the name was touched for nearly 2 more decades. In San Mateo, Laura Jensen's son, now an adult, still lived in his mother's old apartment, keeping the landline number as an inexplicable habit. And in Boise, the box containing Jane Doe's remains still lay quietly in the forensics office's cold storage, among stacked file folders. 2 fragments of life, one lost, one found, coexisted in silence, waiting for time and technology to reconnect the thread broken for nearly 40 years. In the early 2010s, as many U.S. police departments began reopening old cases, thanks to modern forensic technology, the San Jose Police Department also established a cold case unit, dedicated to handling unsolved files. In the catalog of hundreds of backlog cases, investigator Raymond Ortiz happened to see the name Laura Ann Jensen, a young woman missing since 1977, the case noted as unresolved missing. The thin file contained only a few typed statements and a black and white photo of the brown-haired girl's face with a somber gaze. Ortiz felt there was something unexplained. He began reviewing all the documents. The old report showed Laura left a bar with an unknown man, her car abandoned near a residential area, no signs of violence. The case had attracted brief attention before being forgotten. Ortiz decided to go down to the department's evidence vault, where thousands of sealed boxes were stored by code number. After hours of searching, he found the box with the number matching the Jensen case. Inside, everything was intact: a white blouse torn at the shoulder, a pack of Marlboro cigarettes, a red plastic lighter, and an old fingerprint card, all carefully sealed, as if waiting for the right moment to be reopened. Ortiz examined each piece of evidence closely. The blouse was neatly folded in a nylon bag, the cigarette pack still had a few half-smoked cigarettes, the faint old tobacco smell lingering. He took photos for the file, and sent a request to re-examine the fingerprints through the FBI's automated identification system, IUFS, in hopes that new technology could do what 1977 police couldn't. The sample was sent off, and Ortiz waited. A month later, the results came back: no match found, no hits in the national database. Though disappointed, he knew the sample was still viable for preservation and possible future use. He continued trying his luck with the blouse, sending it to the local forensics lab to search for any remaining biological traces. The feedback report was brief: sample too old, not eligible for DNA testing. Ortiz could only note, preserve sample, await suitable technology. Undeterred, he contacted old witnesses from the file, but most had moved away or passed away. Those still alive only vaguely remembered the disappearance and the sketch of the man in the green jacket. No new leads emerged. The Jensen case continued in silence, but Ortiz persisted. He pinned Laura's photo to the board in the cold case unit office, among dozens of other faces. Each day, when entering the room, he paused to look at the photo for a few seconds, like a reminder that somewhere, a son, a mother had not yet returned. Ortiz then sought to contact Ethan Jensen, Laura's son. By then, Ethan was over 40, living in his mother's old apartment in San Mateo. Their conversation was brief but haunting. Ethan said he no longer had hope, but still wanted the truth. Ortiz promised to do everything possible, even if just to give the family closure. For months he continued reviewing missing persons cases from the same period around the Bay Area, looking for patterns in method or location. None had similar details. In those years, federal agencies were developing a new generation of fingerprint identification systems, but they weren't yet operational. Ortiz sent periodic reports to superiors, concluding, case still lacks sufficient evidence for re-investigation, evidence well preserved, potential for re-examination when technology advances. When closing the file, Ortiz added a short line on the cover with a pen, maintain evidence, await opportunity. He understood that much of his work was just waiting. Still, the Laura Jensen case left him with an unusual feeling, a silence too perfect, as if someone had tried to erase every trace of this woman from the world. Before ending his work year, Ortiz returned to the archives, placing the Jensen evidence box back on the shelf among hundreds of old cases. He added a small label, pending, review again when AFIS upgraded. The fluorescent lights in the vault cast a dim glow on the thin layer of dust covering the metal cabinets, and in that quiet space, the Laura Jensen file closed once more, but no longer forgotten. Ortiz knew that with just one small scientific breakthrough, this story would reopen. After the San Jose Cold Case Unit was cut due to budget reductions, Laura Jensen's file fell into silence once again. Investigator Raymond Ortiz, who had pursued the case for years, submitted his final report in early 2013, recommending preservation of the evidence awaiting more advanced forensic technology. No one objected, but no one promised anything either. In the archives, the metal box with the Jensen code number returned to its old spot, among hundreds of unsolved cases. In San Mateo, Laura's mother still lived in the old apartment, where everything was kept as it was the day her daughter left. Mrs. Jensen was now over 80, frail in health, but every morning she brewed a cup of coffee and placed it in front of Laura's photo on the dining table. She still called the police department regularly, her voice hoarse as she asked, "Any news?" The answer was always, "Not yet, ma'am." She wrote letters to TV shows, organized fundraisers, hoping someone would care, but received no replies. The world had changed, only she still lived in the old memories. Laura's son Ethan, now 40, still lived with her to care for her. He kept the habit passed down from her. Each year on January 31st, the day Laura disappeared, he sent a letter to the San Jose Police Department. Each letter was brief. "If there's any news about my mother, please let me know." There was never a response, but those letters were stamped and filed away. For Ethan, it was a way to keep his mother's case from completely vanishing. In 2015, Ortiz retired after more than 30 years in the field. On his last day at the department, he went to the evidence vault and paused in front of the Jensen box. He reread the line he had once written, pending, review when AFIS upgraded. Then he quietly added a note in the handover log. This file needs review when technology is sufficient. After that, he left, and the Jensen case was passed to a young investigator, Detective Morgan, who had never heard the name before. Morgan was from a generation of investigators familiar with computers and electronic databases, but also under pressure to meet case clearance quotas. When reviewing the Jensen file, he realized there was no DNA, no suspect, no witnesses, a hopeless case. He set it aside, prioritizing cases with clearer biological evidence. The name Laura Jensen gradually disappeared from internal meetings again. The following year, Mrs. Jensen passed away in her sleep. She never knew that evidence of her daughter still lay quietly in the evidence vault, waiting to be revisited. Ethan held a small memorial, placing photos of his grandmother and Laura side by side. He said simply, "She spent her life waiting. Now it's my turn." After the funeral, he cleaned the apartment, but changed nothing. The landline still plugged in, the framed photos on the wall in their old spots. On rainy nights, he opened the wooden box of mementos, dozens of letters to the police, photos of young Laura, all faded, but he couldn't bear to throw them away. Ethan still sent letters annually, sometimes just writing, "I'm still waiting." Some years he included a photo of his young daughter with a caption, "This is my mother's granddaughter, she's never known her." He didn't expect a reply, just the feeling that somewhere, In a cold file drawer, his mother's name was still being seen. In the cold case unit, the Jensen file continued passing through many hands. No one noticed the connection between the California missing person case and the unidentified body in Idaho, which had been forgotten for nearly 30 years. The evidence, the blouse and cigarette pack, still existed, preserved in cold storage, but no one reopened it. For the young investigators, the case was just a name on a list of hundreds of missing persons from the 1970s. In the late 2010s, as the federal DNA system expanded, the San Jose PD began reviewing old evidence with forensic potential, yet the Jensen case was still overlooked due to lack of manpower and funding. Ethan was now middle-aged, hair graying, no longer hoping his mother would be found. But each year, on the day she disappeared, he still sent a letter to the police department, a simple repeated act over 40 years, like the last breath of an unextinguished belief. In the small apartment in San Mateo, his mother's landline still worked. On the wall, the photo of Laura Jensen still hung in its old place, the face of the young woman smiling in the dim light, as if still waiting for someone to call her name. Early in 2024, nearly half a century after Laura Jensen disappeared, the Federal Bureau of Investigation (FBI) announced the AFIS 2.0 system, an upgraded version capable of scanning and recovering faint fingerprints that were once considered useless. This new technology opens opportunities for thousands of cold case files across the United States. In San Jose, that information reminded Detective Morgan, who was in charge of the cold case unit, of an old note in the Laura Jensen file left by retired investigator Raymond Ortiz, "Review again," when AFIS upgraded. In the evidence storage, the box labeled Jensen was still intact. Inside was a torn white blouse and a pack of Marlboro cigarettes collected from her car in 1977. Morgan decided to resend the fingerprint sample from the cigarette pack to the FBI, hoping that this time the new technology could do what no one had been able to do for nearly 50 years. The sample was rescanned at the local forensics lab, then sent to the Federal Database Center in West Virginia. The AFIS 2.0 system used geometric reconstruction algorithms that could identify even partial old fingerprints. When the matching process was complete, the result appeared: probable match found. Laura Jensen's fingerprint matched Willie Eugene Sims, born in 1955, now 69 years old, living in Jefferson, Ohio. Morgan was stunned when he read the report. This name had never appeared in the Jensen file. He looked up the background and discovered that Sims had been convicted of armed assault and armed robbery in California in 1978, serving 4 years in prison before moving back to Ohio. Military records clearly stated, in 1977, at the time of Laura's disappearance, Sims was a soldier stationed at Fort Ord Base in Monterey, just over an hour's drive from San Jose. Morgan requested a cross-verification warrant from the FBI. 3 days later, the official results were sent back: confirmed match, 99.8% accuracy. For the first time in nearly half a century, the Laura Jensen case had a specific suspect's name. When he reopened the 1977 witness sketch, Morgan saw the face in the drawing: a man with brown hair, tall build, and a small scar on his left cheek that bore a striking resemblance to Sims's 1978 mugshot. He immediately reported to his superiors. In the cold case unit's internal meeting, everyone agreed this was the most important lead since the case was reopened. Morgan wrote in the minutes: fingerprint link confirmed. Possible suspect Willie E. Sims. At the same time, he contacted the Ohio State Police to verify Sims's current residence. They reported that he was living peacefully with his wife in the suburbs of Jefferson, a mild-mannered man who often helped neighbors fix their cars. No one knew about his prior record in California. To be certain, Morgan sought out the person who knew the case better than anyone: Raymond Ortiz. When he heard the news, Ortiz was silent for a long time, then said, "I've been waiting for this for a dozen years." He advised Morgan to re-examine the blouse, evidence that might still hold DNA, and reminded him that just one matching biological sample would move the case to a new phase. That brief conversation made Morgan acutely feel the weight of time. Ortiz's efforts were now being carried forward. In the following days, Morgan reviewed every detail. Sims had left Fort Ord in the exact week Laura disappeared. He had a history of violence against women, and the dark green jacket described by the witness matched the off-duty uniform from the base. Morgan noted, behavior, location and timeline all align. Sims's records also showed that his 1978 arrest was in the Monterey Bay area, just 60 miles from San Jose. When the report was complete, Morgan sent the confirmed results to the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office, requesting an official investigation. In the conclusion, he wrote, "After 47 years, the fingerprint speaks." To him, it wasn't just a line in a report, it was a belated answer for the woman who had vanished nearly half a century ago. That evening, Morgan stayed late at the office. On the desk, the old evidence box was opened for the first time in years. The white blouse, the cigarette pack, and the yellowed sealed report, silent artifacts for nearly half a century, now became the most crucial pieces of the case. He took photos for the file, resealed it, and placed the box on a separate shelf labeled in red, "Active. Pending DNA review." In Jefferson, Ohio, the 69-year-old man was still living tranquilly, unaware that his name had just appeared in a San Jose PD internal report. And in California, the old photo of Laura Jensen was hung back on the cold case unit bulletin board, under the newly bolded text, "Ongoing investigation. Suspect identified." After 47 years, the fingerprint on an old cigarette pack had finally spoken, opening a path back to the winter night in 1977, when a young woman walked out of a bar in San Jose and never returned. After the fingerprint comparison results were confirmed, the San Jose Police Department reopened the Laura Jensen case as an official criminal investigation. Detective Morgan was appointed team lead, coordinating with the FBI and the Santa Clara District Attorney's Office. The goal: trace the past of Willie Eugene Sims, the 69-year-old man in Ohio, whose name a fingerprint on an old cigarette pack had brought back into the light after nearly half a century. Military records indicated that Sims had been a private stationed at Fort Ord, Monterey, California, from 1976 to 1978. He had multiple disciplinary infractions, fighting disorderly conduct, and harassing women at a bar near the base. After being discharged early, Sims stayed in the San Jose area, living transiently and working odd jobs. In June 1978, just a year after Laura Jensen disappeared, he was arrested in Sacramento for assault with a deadly weapon and armed robbery. The victim was a woman who escaped when he threatened her with a knife in a parking lot. Sims was sentenced to 4 years in prison and released in 1982. Morgan pored over every page of the file. The 1978 mugshot showed a man with cold eyes, a high-bridged nose, and a small scar on his left cheek, an uncanny match to the 1977 witness sketch. After completing his sentence, Sims left California for Idaho, finding work in road construction. According to labor records, he worked for Payette River Contractors in Boise County from 1983 to 1986. His temporary address was less than 2 miles from the Payette River stretch, where a hunter discovered an unidentified female body in 1986, later known as the Boise County Jane Doe. This detail stopped Morgan cold. He cross-referenced the map, measured the distance, and realized Sims's residence aligned with the discovery site. "It can't just be coincidence," he muttered. He immediately sent a request to the Idaho State Police for records of Sims's residency and transient stays. The results confirmed Sims had rented a room in a mobile home park in Horseshoe Bend, Boise County, from 1983 to early 1987. The park owner described him as quiet, often away on jobs, lived alone, and vanished suddenly. Morgan created a timeline chart. 1977, Laura Jensen disappears in San Jose. 1978, Sims arrested and sentenced for assaulting a woman. 1983, 1986, he lives in Boise County, Idaho. 1986, unidentified female body, discovered near the Payette River. The timelines link two seemingly unrelated cases. Morgan called the lieutenant in charge of Idaho's cold case unit. When he mentioned Boise County Jane Doe, the voice on the other end responded immediately, "I know that one, female body, unidentified." Both agreed to open the files and coordinate cross-referencing. While awaiting information, Morgan dug deeper into Sims's background in Ohio. He lived quietly with his wife, working as a mechanic, with no new offenses. Neighbors described him as polite, gentle, likes gardening. But in his criminal record, the felony conviction line, armed assault, 1978, still glared in red. Morgan understood, some people leave a state, start over, but the shadow of the past never fades. He called Raymond Ortiz, the former investigator, who had handled the Jensen file. When Morgan mentioned Idaho, Ortiz fell silent. "I remember 1986, we got a notice from Boise about an unidentified female body. But back then, there was no cross-referencing system. If we'd had shared data then, Laura might have been identified much sooner." That statement only fueled Morgan's determination. A few weeks later, Idaho police sent a report. The 1984 Payette River contractor's employee list included W.E. Sims, with a matching social security number to the suspect. Morgan compared the construction crew photo, the man in the back row, green jacket, stern gaze. The face was eerily similar to the 1978 mugshot. He immediately wrote a report to the FBI and the Santa Clara District Attorney's Office, requesting a federal investigation expansion. His conclusion was succinct: suspect was present in Boise County when the Jane Doe body was discovered. Direct connection to the Jensen case possible. That night, Morgan sat alone in his office. On the desk were two photos, one of Laura Jensen, the young woman who vanished in 1977. The other of the 1986 crime scene body. In between was the file on Willie Eugene Sims, the man linking 2 points 8 years apart. He knew that if the hypothesis held, Laura Jensen had been found long ago. She just hadn't been called by her right name yet. The official investigation was approved at the federal level. For the first time, California and Idaho police coordinated on the same suspect. In a late-day phone call, Ortiz told Morgan in a quiet voice, "You found the thread. Don't let it break again." Morgan closed the file, looking at the faded 1977 handwriting, the words Ortiz had typed on a typewriter. After 47 years, traces thought long faded were gradually re-emerging. The past, finally, was speaking up. In April 2024, after nearly half a century of waiting, the joint investigation between California and Idaho was officially launched. Two seemingly unrelated files, the Laura Jensen disappearance, 1977, and the unidentified Boise County Jane Doe body, 1986, were now placed side by side on the same table. From the matching evidence, police in both states moved to the next step, determining if the two women were one and the same. The first federal meeting was held in San Jose. The California side presented all the facts: the disappearance, the car, the evidence, and the cigarette pack fingerprint matching Willie Eugene Sims, who had lived in Boise County, Idaho, at the exact time the unidentified body was found. The Idaho representative confirmed Sims's residency records aligned with the discovery area. After the expert panel approved, an exhumation order for the Boise County Jane Doe was issued to collect DNA samples. Early in May, the exhumation took place at a small cemetery on the outskirts of Boise, where Jane Doe had been buried for 38 years. Beneath the cold soil was a wooden box containing skeletal remains and remnants of an off-white fabric blouse. Bone samples were taken to the Idaho State Forensic Lab, then transferred to a federal lab for mitochondrial DNA, (mTDNA) analysis. The only technique capable of extracting DNA from degraded bone samples. Meanwhile, in California, police contacted Ethan Jensen, Laura's only son. When he received the call, he went silent. For 40 years, he had sent letters to the police without reply. Now they said they may have found your mother. Ethan agreed to provide a DNA sample, only asking that his identity be kept private until official results. The federal lab conducted the analysis. Jane Doe's DNA was compared to Ethan's mitochondrial DNA. 2 weeks later, the final result arrived: maternal match, 100% probability. The genetic sequences matched completely. After nearly half a century, the mystery had an answer. Boise County Jane Doe was Laura Jensen. When he received the results, Detective Morgan was nearly speechless. He immediately called Raymond Ortiz, who had handled the case for years. Ortiz was silent for a moment, then just sighed. "I knew one day she'd be found." The news was officially reported to the FBI and the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office. The case handover ceremony between the two states was scheduled for that week. In Idaho, forensic specialists prepared to release the remains. The chief forensic officer said quietly, "We've kept her too long. It's time to bring her home." The remains were carefully sealed, placed in a wooden box, and loaded onto a night flight to California. Morgan was personally at the airport when the box was unloaded, gently placing his hand on the wooden lid and whispering, "Welcome back." A few days later, the San Jose Police Department held a press conference. Morgan announced the identification results, confirmed the identity, and stated the expansion of the murder investigation against Willie Eugene Sims. To reporters' questions, he only said, "Sometimes justice comes late, but it still comes." Ethan Jensen was invited to receive the official results. He held the certificate, eyes welling up. "My mom was in Idaho all that time." Morgan nodded. "She's home now." A week later, a memorial service was held at a church in San Mateo. In the solemn space, Laura's photo was placed between two white candles. Ethan stood silently with his wife and daughter. He whispered, "Mom waited so long, but she's finally at peace." In Idaho, a new headstone was erected where Jane Doe had once been buried. It read, "Laura Jensen, 1953-1977, lost in California, found in Idaho." 47 years after the day she disappeared, Laura Jensen was finally called by her right name. And in the cold case unit room, Raymond Ortiz looked at the old photo on the wall and smiled. He knew this case had reached its end, not just for the police, but for the family that had waited half a lifetime. In June 2025, after DNA results confirmed Laura Jensen's identity and the investigation file was completed, the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office officially issued an arrest warrant for Willie Eugene Sims on first-degree murder charges. Nearly half a century after Laura's disappearance, the name once forgotten in the files now became the center of California's longest-running cold case. On the morning of June 11th, in the town of Jefferson, Ohio, where Sims had lived for over 30 years, federal agents and local police moved in simultaneously. At 7 a.m., they knocked on the door of the small wooden house in the middle of the quiet street. When Sims opened the door, the officer presented the warrant. "Willie Eugene Sims, you are under arrest for a murder that occurred in the state of California in 1977. The 69-year-old man stood frozen, silent for a few seconds before being handcuffed. His wife, Martha, rushed out in panic and asked, "Is there some mistake?" "He's never left Ohio," the officer replied curtly. "We have a federal warrant and confirmed DNA evidence." Neighbors gathered outside, stunned as they watched the man they knew as their kind neighbor being led to the car. The news spread quickly. By noon, local TV stations aired footage of Sims's arrest, his face calm but his hands trembling. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, "Suspect arrested in 1977 disappearance case," one of America's longest cold cases. For the Jefferson community, it was a massive shock. They only knew Sims as a quiet man who often helped neighbors fix lawnmowers and shovel snow. One person told a reporter, "I can't believe it. He was friendly with everyone, never showed any aggression." When taken to the station, Sims remained silent. His court-appointed attorney advised him not to speak to the press. In the first interrogation, Sims only said, "I don't know who she is. They're wrong." But the evidence sent by the FBI was too clear. Fingerprints matching the sample taken from the cigarette pack in 1977, DNA matching the sample found on the blouse, and residency records proving he had once lived near where the body was discovered. That afternoon, investigators from San Jose flew to Ohio to handle the extradition paperwork. When the plane carrying Sims landed in San Francisco, he was escorted to the Santa Clara County Detention Center. The press crowded the exit, camera flashes popping non-stop. Sims kept his head down, ignoring all questions. A reporter shouted, "Did you kill Laura Jensen?" He stayed silent, just turning away. In San Jose, Detective Morgan received the call confirming the arrest warrant had been executed. He stood in the cold case unit office, looking at the photo of Laura Jensen on the wall. "Finally, she's being heard," he said softly. On the other end of the line, Raymond Ortiz simply replied, "You finished the job we started nearly half a century ago." The arrest news quickly became a national focus. The Washington Post ran an article, "Cold Case Solved After 48 Years, Former Soldier Arrested in California Murder." CNN opened its evening broadcast, "A disappearance case, long thought forgotten, finally cracked, thanks to DNA technology." Local papers replayed images of the 1977 Toyota, the San Jose bar, and an old photo of Laura, the young woman finally given back her name. In Jefferson, silence enveloped the small neighborhood. Sims's house was cordoned off, windows tightly shut. Neighbors avoided mentioning his name. Martha issued a short statement through her attorney. "My husband is innocent. He could never do something so horrific." But to the authorities, the evidence was undeniable. On June 18, Sims made his first court appearance in Santa Clara County. He wore an orange prison jumpsuit, silver hair, and a gaunt face. When the judge asked, he quietly replied, "Not guilty." The press captured the scene as an iconic moment, the nearly 50-year disappearance case finally entering the justice phase. The subsequent press conference at the San Jose Police Department headquarters drew dozens of reporters. The spokesperson said, "This is one of the longest cold cases solved through persistence and modern forensic technology." When asked about his emotions, Morgan only replied, "Justice may be late, but it never forgets the way." That evening, television replayed images of Laura Jensen, the girl with brown hair and a gentle smile, interspersed with footage of the silver-haired man being led to the car. Two fates, one from the past and one from the present, had finally met. And this time, the story was no longer about disappearance, but about justice, though late, returning. In the brightly lit interrogation room at the Santa Clara County Detention Center, Willie Eugene Sims sat across from Detective Morgan, an FBI representative, and the district prosecutor. At 69, with silver hair, and a face etched with wrinkles but eyes still cold, the first formal statement session began after his defense attorney was appointed. Morgan opened the thick file. "Mr. Sims, tell us what you remember about the night of January 31, 1977, at the Lion's Den Bar, in San Jose." Sims crossed his arms, his voice hoarse, "I didn't kill anyone. I don't know that girl." Morgan placed a photo of Laura Jensen on the table. He glanced at it briefly, then sighed. "I might have talked to her. I used to go to that bar, maybe just exchanged a few words." When Morgan asked if he left the bar with Laura, Sims replied slowly, "I don't remember. I drank a lot. Maybe I went out for a smoke, maybe said a few words and left. I didn't hurt anyone." The attorney interjected, "My client is nearly 70. Memories from nearly half a century ago can't be accurate. The police can't rely on this vague recollection to charge him." Morgan said nothing, just placed the Marlboro cigarette pack seized from Laura's car on the table. "Do you recognize this?" Sims examined it closely, frowning. "I've smoked Marlboro my whole life. Maybe I gave her one. Strangers ask for cigarettes, right?" Morgan replied softly, "But the fingerprints on the pack are yours." When the prosecutor presented the DNA results, stating that Sims's biological sample matched the DNA on Laura's blouse, the item used to strangle the victim. Sims shrugged slightly. DNA? After nearly 50 years, are you kidding? That could belong to anyone. The defense attorney immediately said, "We question the preservation process. The evidence is too old to be considered reliable." The prosecutor responded firmly. The DNA sample was extracted using mitochondrial DNA techniques, with a match probability over 99.9%. No errors. Sims fell silent, eyes down on the table. The interrogation lasted over 3 hours. When asked about the period he lived in Idaho in the 1980s, near the area where the unidentified body was found, Sims only said, "I worked construction all over Idaho, Montana. I don't remember clearly. If I was there, it was just for work." Morgan placed a map in front of him, pointing to Boise County. "We have residency records and payroll stubs. You lived here, less than 2 miles from where the body was found." Sims gave a faint smile. "Coincidence? You're trying to build a story I'm not part of." When the interrogation ended, Sims stuck to his denials. Before leaving the room, he said, "I didn't kill Laura Jensen. I didn't hurt anyone. You're digging up the past that should stay buried." Morgan watched him go, understanding that his silence wasn't calm, it was defense. Outside, the defense attorney held a press conference, declaring, "My client is the victim of a historical mistake. Old DNA evidence, no witnesses left, faded memories, all too weak to convict." But forensic experts rebutted immediately afterward. The lab supervisor affirmed, the DNA sample was properly preserved. Since 1977, the results are fully admissible in court. In jail, Sims was quiet, refusing interviews and ignoring the media. He lived reclusively, reading the Bible every morning. The press described him as the old man carrying half a century's secrets. In Ohio, his wife Martha filed an appeal, asserting her husband was a kind man, misunderstood in the past. But public opinion no longer believed it. Meanwhile, Morgan and the investigative team continued to bolster the case. They compiled all the evidence: fingerprints, DNA, Idaho, residency records, and witness sketches. The final report to the prosecutor stated clearly, "No reasonable doubt remains regarding Willie Eugene Sims's involvement in the Jensen case." Morgan printed the conclusion and pinned it to the wall between 2 photos, one of Laura Jensen, the young woman with a gentle smile, the other of Sims, the elderly man in prison garb. 2 lives bound by time and irrefutable evidence. That evening, the office phone rang. Raymond Ortiz called from home. "Did he say anything?" "Just that he doesn't remember," Morgan replied. Ortiz's voice grew grave. "People can forget a lot, but no one forgets their own sins. He was just hoping everyone else had." The media called that interrogation the confession of the century. When the final suspect in the 1977 disappearance case finally faced the truth, though still hiding behind the one repeated phrase, "I don't remember." After the interrogation, Detective Morgan's team focused all efforts on strengthening the scientific evidence, the final pieces to close the case that had dragged on for nearly half a century. All evidence seized in 1977, the white blouse, the Marlboro cigarette pack, and Willie Eugene Sims's military records, was sent to a federal forensics lab for re-examination with modern technology. 2 weeks later, the results arrived. The 10-page report carried enough weight to transform the entire file. The DNA on the blouse collar matched Sims's sample perfectly, with a false positive probability, less than 1 in 10 billion. The genetic markers matched at all 21 loci. The experts confirmed, no reasonable doubt, the DNA on the evidence belongs to Willie Eugene Sims. Under Laura's fingernails, a second biological sample was found, also matching Sims, proving the victim had fought back before death. Morgan read the report in silence. Those cold numbers were the voice of truth that time couldn't blur. In the meeting with the district prosecutor, he presented the full chain of evidence: fingerprints, DNA, residency records, and Sims's history of violent offenses. Every fact pointed in the same direction. He was the man who left the bar with Laura that night. The next step was retrieving military records. The FBI sent a request to the Department of Defense and received a declassified file from 1977. Sims's payroll showed he had taken 2 days leave at the end of January, matching exactly with the time of Laura Jensen's disappearance. The unit log noted 48 hours, unauthorized absence. Military GPS data from the time was rudimentary, but there was a notation that Sims had left Fort Ord in Monterey, about 50 miles from San Jose. Notably, the green jacket in the witness sketch was the off-duty uniform from this base. Morgan presented all the information in a report over 200 pages long, sent to the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office. One conclusion line was underlined: the suspect was in the crime scene area at the exact time of the incident, with matching biological and physical evidence. The prosecutor said simply, "It's no longer a theory. This was premeditated murder." To bolster further, the Idaho forensics team, where Laura's remains were stored, conducted 3D scans and re-examined the rib and jaw bones. The results showed multiple fractures from direct force, including trauma to the jaw and neck bones, consistent with a strangulation attack. The forensic report stated, the victim suffered severe physical violence before death. The marks matched strangulation by fabric. The torn blouse shoulder fragment and remaining threads around the neck area of the remains were the most authentic proof of the cause of death mechanism. When all the data was pieced together, the picture became clear. Laura Jensen left the bar with Sims, was attacked in the car, the perpetrator strangled her with the blouse, and then drove the body to Idaho, where he later worked, to dispose of it. The travel traces, timeline and behavior all matched perfectly. The news spread quickly across America. The Los Angeles Times ran the headline, "DNA and Military Records, Close 48-Year Disappearance Case." Many TV channels replayed scenes of the Lion's Den bar, the parking lot, interspersed with modern lab footage, and the caption, "Truth Never Dies." In his cell, Sims stuck to his denials. When his attorney showed him the report, he just smirked. Numbers have no feelings, they can be wrong. But even his own lawyer was no longer certain. If you're innocent, everything is stacked against you, the man said. Sims fell silent, his gaze drifting away. For Morgan, this was a moment both heavy and fulfilling. Nearly half a century, and just one forgotten cigarette pack had paved the way for justice. At the press conference, he said, "Science doesn't forget, it remembers for those who can't speak." That afternoon, he went to see Ethan Jensen. Upon hearing the DNA results and military data had confirmed the full truth, Ethan just nodded, eyes welling up. "I always knew my mom didn't go far away," he said softly. Morgan replied, "Now she's back, and so is the truth." A week later, the file was finalized and sent to Santa Clara court for prosecution preparation. On the cover, Morgan wrote simply, "Case closed, truth proven." On the office wall, the old photo of Laura Jensen remained, her eyes seeming to look into the distance, where justice had finally found its way back. October 2025. The trial of Willie Eugene Sims took place at Santa Clara County Superior Court, closing nearly half a century of searching for justice for Laura Jensen. Outside the courthouse gates, dozens of reporters stood vigil, cameras broadcasting live on television. The public called it California's longest-running cold case to go to trial. Sims appeared in a gray suit, with silver hair and a subdued gaze. In the back row, Ethan Jensen, Laura's son, sat next to Detective Morgan and former investigator Raymond Ortiz. When the judge banged the gavel, the large room fell silent. Prosecutor Rachel Alvarez opened with a firm voice, "After 48 years, justice finally has a chance to speak." She presented the jury with a series of evidence: fingerprints on the Marlboro pack, Sims's DNA on the blouse, military records confirming his presence in San Jose when Laura disappeared. She held up the 1977 witness sketch, placing it next to Sims's 1978 mugshot photo, the two faces nearly identical. Technology has changed, Alvarez said, but the truth hasn't. The defense attorney Daniel Price countered, my client is accused based on evidence that's too old. The DNA evidence is nearly half a century old. No one can guarantee the sample wasn't contaminated. Justice cannot be built on assumptions. He emphasized that the case lacked witnesses. No one had seen Sims commit the crime. To rebut, the prosecution called the FBI forensic expert to testify. He explained the continuous cold storage preservation process for the samples over 47 years, along with mitochondrial DNA and genetic genealogy technology ensuring over 99.9% reliability. Time cannot falsify the truth, he said. The prosecution continued to screen a 3D model of the wounds on the remains, fractures to the neck and ribs consistent with a strangulation attack. Military data was projected on the screen, payroll and duty logs clearly showing Sims absent from Fort Ord Base at the exact time Laura went missing. Attorney Price tried to sow doubt. No witnesses, no cameras, just scientific speculation. My client is an elderly man with poor memory, accused based on numbers. He said, this is a trial of technology, not of memory. But the prosecution rebutted, memory can fade, but biological traces don't lie. In the following arguments, the prosecution reconstructed Sims's journey from Fort Ord to San Jose and then Idaho, where Laura's body was found. A red line on the map connected all the locations, illustrating the suspect's movements. Alvarez said, it was a journey of crime from where she was killed to where she was buried. The trial lasted many days. The press reported every detail, and the public was divided in opinion. One side argued that the DNA evidence was the most definitive testimony of science. The other worried it was a dangerous precedent for prosecuting based on old samples. Television continuously aired images of the Lion's Den bar, the abandoned car, interspersed with lab scenes, forming a symbol of the confrontation between time and justice. One morning, Detective Morgan was called to testify. He recounted the journey of reopening the case, retrieving evidence, sending DNA samples, and receiving the match results. His voice was low and emotional. We weren't just investigating a murder, we were restoring identity to a forgotten woman. As he left the stand, Ethan Jensen stood up and nodded in thanks, his eyes red-rimmed. Sims remained calm throughout the trial. He rarely looked up, only exchanging brief words with his attorney. When the prosecution asked, did you meet Laura Jensen that night at the Lion's Den? He replied, possibly, I don't remember. That answer caused a stir in the courtroom, but he remained silent. The trial entered its final phase. The prosecution concluded, no memory is needed to convict, only the truth. The fingerprints, DNA, travel route all say the same thing. Sims was there the night she died. Attorney Price responded, justice must be based on absolute certainty, and no one can be certain of anything after nearly half a century. When the judge declared the arguments closed, the jury was led into the deliberation room. Afternoon light streamed through the windows, illuminating the faces of those who had waited nearly 5 decades. Outside, reporters crowded the courthouse lawn. In the courtroom, Ethan sat still, bowing his head in prayer. Morgan and Ortiz silently gazed up at the words, "In God we trust," engraved on the wall. Justice had not yet been pronounced, but for the first time in 48 years, the truth had been placed on the scales, where past and present awaited a final verdict together. A week after the trial ended its arguments, while the jury was still deliberating, Laura Ann Jensen's remains were brought back to San Mateo, where she was born and raised. The hearse carrying the small wooden box of bones left Idaho on a foggy morning, traveling hundreds of miles of highway between the two states, the final journey closing 48 years of her silent wandering. At Greenlawn Memorial Park Cemetery, the burial ceremony was simple, attended only by family, old friends, and a few investigators who had worked the case. A gentle wind blew through the eucalyptus trees, white daisies placed along the path, and a black and white photo of Laura, taken when she was 24, set on a small wooden stand amid the grass. The California sky that day was still as if holding its breath. Ethan Jensen, Laura's only son, led the ceremony. He had prepared his speech for weeks, but when he held the paper in his hand, his voice choked. For the past 48 years, he said slowly, we've had only one question: where is Mom? And today finally, we have the answer. My mother is no longer just a name in a missing persons file. She has been brought home. Everyone bowed their heads in silence. Detective Morgan stood in the back, clutching his hat tightly, his gaze fixed on the small coffin. Beside him, Raymond Ortiz, who had reopened the case in 2011, nodded slightly as a final farewell. He was old now, with white hair, but his eyes still brightened as he looked at Laura's photo. She's finally been called by her right name, he said softly, as if to himself. An old friend of Laura's, now in her 60s, shared memories of her. Laura always smiled, always thought of others. The day she went missing, we couldn't believe it. For many years we've lit candles every January, hoping one day she'd come back. Today we've kept that promise. After Ethan's speech, the small church band played Amazing Grace. The trumpet sounded through the quiet space, blending with the wind rustling through the trees. Ethan bent down, placing his hand on the coffin lid. Mom's home now, he whispered, his voice trembling but clear. On the newly erected gravestone, simple words were engraved: Laura Ann Jensen 1953, 1977, missing 1977, found 2025, finally home. Under the golden afternoon light, the words shimmered like a final affirmation. Justice, though late, had come. After the burial, everyone gathered at a small church near the San Mateo coast, where Laura's mother had once volunteered. Ethan thanked each person who came. He turned to Morgan and said, "You didn't just find my mother, you brought back all her memories." Morgan replied softly, "We just reconnected the thread that time had cut." That afternoon, as everyone had left, Ethan stayed by his mother's grave. He sat for a long time, gazing at the words carved in the granite. A gentle wind blew, carrying the scent of sea salt from afar. He opened his mother's old notebook, a small diary she had written in before disappearing, now with only a few faded pages left. On the last page was the line, "Wherever you go, my dear son, remember Mom always wanted to come home." He smiled through tears, closing the notebook and placing it before the gravestone. "Now you're home," he said softly. In the distance, Morgan and Ortiz still stood by the police car, quietly watching. Ortiz looked at the sky turning purple, his voice low. "You know some cases don't end with a verdict, but with a return." Morgan nodded, his gaze leaving Laura's grave and looking out to the sea. "Yes, this is justice in her way, peaceful and true." News of the burial spread across evening television channels. The broadcasts didn't talk about the crime, but about the long journey of justice. They showed footage of Ethan by the gravestone, the words "missing 1977, found 2025" appearing on screen like a symbol for thousands of cold cases still waiting to be solved. At the cold case unit office, Laura Jensen's photo was removed from the main case board and hung separately on the closed cases wall. Below it, Morgan taped a small note, "Returned home. 2025. The room was quiet, only the steady whir of the ceiling fan remaining. As he left the building, Morgan paused for a moment, watching the sunset fall over the Santa Clara Valley. He knew that though the jury was still deliberating, though the final verdict hadn't been announced, the most important thing had happened. Laura Jensen was no longer a forgotten name in a file, but a daughter, a mother, someone brought home after 48 years of being lost. As Laura Ann Jensen's burial ended, the echoes of the case spread across America. But the strongest reaction was in Idaho, the land that had buried her for nearly 40 years under the name Jane Doe. Boise County residents were stunned to learn that Willie Eugene Sims, the suspect charged with killing Laura, had once lived in their community. The Idaho Statesman and Boise Valley Chronicle ran front-page stories, "Man who once lived among us charged with murder in California." Old neighbors recounted that Sims was quiet, helpful, once a construction worker in Horseshoe Bend. "Can't believe it," one said. "He fixed my roof." Locals went to the Payette River banks, where Laura's remains were discovered in 1986. placing wildflowers and lighting candles. A group of students made a memorial video posted online with the caption, "Where Justice Began Again." The clip went viral. In California, the Jensen case sparked a new wave. Many families with missing loved ones from the 1970s, 1980s, filed requests to reopen old files, hoping DNA technology would bring answers. The San Jose Police Department received hundreds of calls in just 1 week. A woman in Fresno said, "If they could find Laura after 48 years, maybe my mother can be found too." Media everywhere hailed the case as a symbol of belated justice. TV networks replayed the journey from the night Laura went missing in San Jose to her identification in Idaho. Dateline NBC aired a special report, "Cold Case No More: The Return of Laura Jensen," bringing tears to millions of viewers. Commentators noted, with just a faint fingerprint, a small fiber, justice can be revived. DNA technology, once a distant dream, was now seen as a beacon illuminating old cases. Forensic professor Alan Whitmore said, "The Jensen case proves that as long as evidence is preserved, justice can still come alive. Time cannot erase the truth." In San Mateo, Ethan Jensen, Laura's son, gradually found peace again. Each week he visited his mother's grave, placing a bunch of white daisies and a note with the words, "Thank you, Mom, for teaching me never to stop believing." For him, the upcoming verdict was no longer the most important thing. It was that his mother had returned, been called by her right name, and laid to rest in her homeland. Detective Morgan continued working in the cold case unit. On the office wall, Laura's photo hung amid the words "Returned Home, 2025. Each time he passed by, he still paused for a few seconds. For him, the Jensen case wasn't just an investigative success, but a reminder that justice sometimes just needs one person who doesn't give up. Raymond Ortiz, now retired, called him every month. "There are still many waiting to be called by name." Morgan always replied, "We'll keep going." In Idaho, authorities established the Jane Doe Project, a fund to support identifying unidentified victims using genetic technology, inspired by the Jensen case. In just 1 month, the fund received thousands of dollars in donations from everywhere. A small sign was erected near the Payette River, inscribed, "Where a woman was found, and justice began again." The media continued to mine the story, from print to podcasts. Commentaries called Laura the awakener of sleeping cases. One journalist wrote, "Justice isn't always a police siren. Sometimes, it's a DNA data stream appearing on a screen." By the end of 2025, as snow covered Idaho and Christmas lights blazed in California, the Jensen case was officially closed in the files. But the echoes remained. Other missing families saw in the story a ray of hope. In San Mateo, Ethan stood before his mother's gravestone, whispering, "Mom's come home, and she's brought justice with her." In a year-end interview, Morgan was asked what made him believe the case could be cracked after nearly half a century. He replied, "Time can fade everything, but it can't fade the truth. As long as there's someone searching, justice still has a chance to be found." Night fell, the cold case unit building quiet, only a dim light casting on Laura Jensen's photo, the young woman with a gentle smile, now a symbol of a simple truth: technology can change, but faith is what keeps the truth alive through the years. The story of Laura Jensen is not just a case solved cold, using APHIS 2.0 and mitochondrial DNA. It is a mirror reflecting life in the United States today, where technology, community, and perseverance can come together to bring back the truth. From a pack of Marlboro and a torn blouse preserved to standard for 48 years, to investigator Ortiz's note review when APHIS upgraded, and the federal coordination efforts between California, Idaho, we learn that strategic persistence is just as important as determination. Practical advice for families with missing loved ones: proactively upload profiles to NamUs, update photos' biometric features, maintain regular contact with investigative agencies, like the way Ethan sends annual letters, and directly ask about retesting when technology upgrades. APHIS, mtDNA. Genetic genealogy. For the community, the shock in Boise County reminds us not to hastily label someone as harmless to skip verification. Support budgets for local forensic labs, funds like the Jane Doe Project, and participate in family DNA sampling days when invited. Ethical data consensus can unlock many similar cases. For law enforcement agencies, the lesson is to standardize long-term evidence preservation procedures, interconnect federal-state data, and maintain cold case units even with tight budgets, because a small note like Ortiz's can change a family's fate. At the personal level, social safety still starts from small habits: going to bars with the buddy system, notifying itineraries, keeping information about the last person you met. Finally, when standing before a gravestone engraved "Missing 1977, Found 2025, we remember that technology is just a tool. It is faith, diligence, and the way the community treats evidence, treats victims, that helps justice find its way, even if it has been lost for nearly half a century. Thank you for following to the end of the story about Laura Jensen's justice journey, proof that the truth can be buried, but never disappears. Please subscribe to the channel to join us in continuing to explore other cold cases, where technology and faith are still lighting up hope for the forgotten.